What's up, y'all? It's 10 at 3 time at Tennessee. How are you? Hope you're doing well. Hope everything in your life is going really well. I hope that you're ready for a rockin' New Year's Eve, a safe New Year's Eve, but nonetheless a rockin' New Year's Eve. I wonder every year why we can't here in Knoxville have the Sun Sphere drop like they do in Times Square, you know? Just imagine flocks of people headed to the mecca of downtown Knoxville to see that glorious Sun Sphere dropping down, and then boom, 2026. The crowd goes wild. We can dream, can't we? We can dream. But the Sun Sphere has other uses right now. As my son says, that's where Santa Claus lives. So there is lots to discuss today, and we'll do that. I got Miss Ainsley in here with me today because Tom is not here. He'll be in a little bit later, but he said, to be honest, it's New Year's Eve, and it's what time? It's 3 o'clock Eastern. He's already just hammered. He can't do it. He's getting too amped up for New Year's Eve. He can't come in. It's, it is what it is.
Hopefully he saves a little juice because he's running the New Year's Eve stream tonight.
Oh, he'll be fine. That's why he's getting that way now. You got time, get a little coffee in you later. You're good to go. There's no problems there. We wanted to be a little bit light off the top today. We'll also discuss, before we don't mention it again today probably, Tennessee basketball did last night go on and do what it should have done against South Carolina State, won that game, I believe 105-56. I don't know what more you can, or 55, 104-55. I don't know what you can really say about a game of that score other than it happened. When you're a 44.5-point favorite and you cover, you've had a pretty decent day. Not a perfect one, but lots to discuss about that maybe a little bit later as those guys get cranked up for SEC play starting Saturday at 18th-ranked Arkansas there at formidable Bud Walton Arena. John Calipari's Razorbacks against Rick Barnes Vols, two very close friends who, despite coaching for rival institutions for a number of years now, have remained. They're about as close as two people can get. They go back a long way. Get all that out of the way to discuss what is obviously a disappointing day for Tennessee football. There's no question about that. The Vols go to the Music City Bowl, lose at the Horn 30-28 to Illinois, and there's a lot to unpack from that. So much so that I like to do this sometimes. Here's today's show notes for those of you watching at home. It's got the name, as it usually does, 10 at 3 Wednesday, 12/31/25. And then there's nothing underneath that. Because I don't think any notes are required to discuss the situation as it is right now with Tennessee football. It's a nuanced discussion. I think that there's layers to it. I think there are different ways you could come at this. I try not to be one of these sort of overly emotional, trying to go viral, say wild things kind of guys. To be honest, I get kind of secondhand embarrassment watching some peers in the industry who do those things. And hey, it's a style that absolutely works for some people, and they have made magnificent careers, Hall of Fame careers for themselves doing that. And for some people, it's authentic, but for others, it's not, and you can tell. And I don't like to manufacture things. I like to go a little bit more deeply into things, a little bit more. I don't just want to all sides everything, because at the end of the day, you got to call balls and strikes and call things what they are. But before getting to that point, I think you got to be fair. And that was my biggest concern, frankly, when I made this move in my career to come over here, was that you think about TV stuff and you think about sort of a bunch of short bursts of things that you say and then move on to something else, and you get surface level on a lot of stuff, and it's really hard. The best can do it, but it's really hard to get a completely nuanced just argument, discussion, point, fact, story. Only the best can do this in like a really short period of time, like a couple minutes, boom, 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 there you go. That's what you need to know. It is a skill that I don't know. Nothing's impossible. Maybe at some point I could get there, but that's not me. I've always been more conversational, and that's why, podcasts and things of that nature, and certainly written columns have always been more of the go-to space for me to talk about these things because I think they deserve nuanced, somewhat intelligent, fun, lighthearted when possible, serious when it needs to be, discussion. And that's why I was really comforted to know that when I was coming over here, they were like, hey, hold on. We might be able to meet in the middle here. And so how about an hour show every day? It's a show / podcast / whatever you want. And basically don't cuss. And other than that, you're good to go. Don't cuss, don't break copyright laws, and you're off and running. And so we can sit down here on days like this. It's really helpful to sit down and discuss what I think matters, what I think doesn't matter, and what we all can know and what we all should agree we don't know. Really big on the whole think / know policy. I think too many people say things that they think and sort of design them or present them as facts when they are often selectively gathered facts or opinions or some sort of, they have a point that they wanted to arrive at. They found their destination that they wanted, and then they worked the problem backward to kind of set that up. I don't believe in that. I think in telling people, hey, this is what I think, and here's what I know. And sometimes those are one and the same, because if you know something, by definition, you also think that, usually, right? But if you think something, that doesn't mean you know it. Those are often different things. And so I don't ever want to present something I think as something I know. And I also don't want to tell you, the viewer, you, the listener, how you should feel about anything. I can present an argument. I can present a debate. I can present a set of facts, a set of opinions, put them together, put them in a pot, stir it up, and say, this is what I think. But there's nobody anywhere telling you that's what you got to think. There are two people on this planet right now who have to do what I say. My 4-year-old son and my 6-year-old corgi. They have to do what I say. Nobody else has to. I'm telling you what I think. I'm not telling you what you should think. And the things that we think might be different, but the fact of the matter is I'm hired and allowed to make a living by telling you what I think. And so this is what I think. I think what happened last night for Tennessee, most of it not really relevant to the big picture. But the parts of it that are relevant to the big picture are really, really important, and they're not acceptable, and they need to change. So right now you're looking at a situation where you cover sports long enough, you cover college sports long enough. What, a quarter century now for me, I guess. I'm the oldest. I feel like the oldest or 43-year-old on the planet at times, or it feels like it's. Did I start? Yeah, I started doing this at 17. I did 17/18, and I've been around this, and I have seen pretty much the full spectrum of things you can see, right? From unimaginably good to unimaginably bad, and then the million shades of gray that are kind of in between those two polar opposites. I've seen national championships. I've seen teams with, 400 winning percentages. I've seen teams lose a bunch of games. I've seen teams be at or near the bottom of their league. I've seen many coaches, be dismissed. I've seen many coaches get significant promotions and raises and all these other things. And I feel fairly qualified to tell you this. I've seen hopeless. I've seen it. And I think when you see it, it's unmistakable. And right now with Tennessee football, I'm not anywhere near that point. So we're going to have some criticisms, and we're going to have some points of discussion that are a little bit perhaps uncomfortable. But I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle that at the end of the day, if you're making a bottom line argument, I do not in any way, shape, or form see this as a hopeless situation. I've seen hopeless. This ain't that. So let's just get that out of the way straight up. Let's get that straight out of the way. But there are serious, significant, meaningful ways in which I think it's reasonable to be concerned. Not in terms of a program falling off the rails, but of a program spending championship level money, putting championship level resources into a product that will not be championship caliber at the end of the day. And that is not a great thing, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you otherwise. I think that would be wrong. I think it'd be foolish, silly. I don't. The way football games were managed this season was not acceptable, given the resources at the disposal of this coaching staff. And it wasn't just last night. It wasn't just the Illinois game. Because I said this, and I meant it, and I still mean it, the result of that game did not matter. You win it by a point, you lose it by a point, you win it by 50, you lose it by 50. Does not matter. You're in the playoff or you're not in the playoff. And if you're not in the playoff, then you're going to get some of your best players are not going to play in the game. And when you take a Tennessee defense and add 4 more pretty significant departures on top of a defense that wasn't great to begin with, but those were legitimate NFL players, you're not going to get a great performance. And if you think going into a game that you're going to get a great performance, I don't know how to convince you otherwise, because if you can't be convinced of that, what can you be convinced of? If you take a defense that we knew all season long, not a great defense, and had some injuries that it couldn't afford, that's obviously a part of it. But still a defense that had some good players on it, but wasn't very good. And hey, the defensive coordinator, who almost won the award for the nation's best assistant coach just last season, is shown the door as a result. And a guy who isn't a bad coach, he's a good football coach. Auburn picked him up immediately. You don't go to places like Auburn. They don't try to hire bad coaches down there. They're a little chaotic, but they've had some good moments. And they just hired a really good football coach, I think, in Alex Golesh. They're going through hell in the portal right now. But that's what happens when you go through a coaching transition. That's not the end of the world, I think. Tennessee showed with Josh Heupel, you can still put together pretty decent team pretty quickly despite all that. And Golesh was a part of that team at Auburn, part of that staff at Tennessee that did that. So my point is, we knew from the outset that the defense was not great, but it had some really good players. And a lot of those really good players were like, nah, I'm going to go get ready for the NFL. At least one at all 3 levels. Then another guy you couldn't really afford to lose, Jalen McMurray, gets hurt in practice, and he's very limited in the game, does everything he can. I think the kid showed tremendous toughness, he and Miles Kitselman both, in wanting to play in that game. And they tried, and they did a couple things. But if you gave a logical person the set of facts, not opinions, but facts of what things are going into that bowl game, I don't know how you could come up with any conclusion other than they're not going to be very good on defense in this game. They were honestly maybe a bit better than I thought they would be defensively, if I'm being honest. That's how low I'd set the bar. But again, to me, I don't care. I don't. And that game was what it was. And it was going to be very hard to exit that game, to me anyway, adding serious discussion onto the situation of the head coach. I mean, the Vanderbilt game, the end of that's what mattered. The way that you lost those close games during the regular season when you could have won them, that mattered. And a lot of things go into that. But at the end of the day, some decisions made by the head coach, obviously a big part of that, decisions that did not work. And it's the nature of this thing that when you make tough decisions that work in this business, people just go, oh, well, that's what you should be doing. And then you make a mistake and people go, you're the biggest idiot who's ever lived. And is that fair? Not really. Is that ever going to change? No. These guys are paid what they're paid for many reasons. One of them is the programs bring in that much money, and the fair market is the fair market. And the other part of it is the stress and the volatility. And that's just how this goes. And big boy money equals big boy criticism. And the result of that game last night, I didn't care about it beforehand. I don't care about it now. I don't think anything that's going to happen at Tennessee in this offseason was really going to be significantly impacted by anything that happened specifically in that game. Because you played without, even offensively, you took the guy who takes the top off of defenses and you took him, one of the best receivers in the country, and he didn't play. And that harmed Tennessee's ability to stretch the field, which mattered because that kind of played into what Illinois was doing and what they wanted. Illinois got to play the game they kind of wanted. Brett Bielema and his staff didn't go perfectly for them, but the plan they set out, and you could see from the beginning, crystal clear, both sides of the ball, the stuff they were trying to do. And a lot more of it worked than didn't. They got the style of game they wanted. They got the ball as much as they wanted it. They kept Tennessee's defense on the field a long time. They, on the balance of play, fairly and squarely earned that game, earned that win. But Tennessee made a couple plays, including, Joakim Dotson's return. What a play. What a freaking play that was. And to go from bobbling, it's funny how many times like bobbling and kickoff or punt actually can benefit the team that bobbles it, because it kind of, it kind of takes the discipline rush lanes or discipline coverage lanes of the coverage unit and scatters them because it's unexpected. You don't expect the guy to not catch the ball. And when he doesn't catch it, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, instead of running in a straight line and maintaining your gap that you need to do, you'll go left or go right or go toward the ball. Because instinctively, you see a ball on the ground. As a football player, you're running to that ball. You're worked on. It's Pavlovian. Every day you see this. You see a ball bouncing on the ground. You probably cuss in your head for a second, oh bleep, and then you go run to the ball. And so it gets a defense out of sorts. So you would never coach a guy offensively to do this, but sometimes when it happens, you get a chance to go make a play if you can go get the ball. And Tennessee did that. Made a really, really nice play. Really good moment for the true freshman. Memphis native, played at Baylor School down in Chattanooga. That was a really nice moment for him. And those are the kinds of things that can happen in these bowl games where you go, that's cool. That guy got an opportunity. He made a play. Tennessee sent a player, Braylon Harmon, I think, redshirt freshman wide receiver from Knoxville Catholic High School, walk on, wearing number 42 to go back and receive a punt in that game. You don't see number 40. Number 42 is usually the guy kicking the ball. Tennessee was like, nah, we're going to have number 42 catch the ball. So straight away, that should tell you what's going on, what kind of game this is. But Tennessee makes that play. And then from that point forward, that's where the concern started for me. Because in that moment, in those final moments, we saw something emerge, or reemerge, I should say, that happened more than once during the regular season, and that was very, very questionable management of the game and the clock. And here's where things get problematic for me. Early in the season, it's been a theme all season. From the very first few games of the season on, there were time management things, and it goes back really even to previous years, but there were time management things this season, decisions that were made that I understood. A lot of people didn't understand them, and the result of them, obviously, not great. But I could, and I did at the time, say, I understand these moves. I understand in this specific game, in this specific set of circumstances, why you would make the decision you made. Whether it works or doesn't, I see where your head was on this. And I can roll with that. I can roll with that decision. It's not a bad outcome doesn't necessarily mean that a bad decision preceded it. It just means it's a bad outcome. And you have to make difficult decisions in the moment as coaches. And sometimes I think it's only fair to sit back and say, okay, what's going on in that exact moment at that exact time, knowing the things we know, given the state of the score, the time, who was getting the ball to open the next half, what your kicker had been doing that day, what the other team's kicker's doing, where the wind is blowing. A lot of things go into this. And you can make a decision that maybe I wouldn't make, but I understand why you did it, and I'm not going to criticize you for it. But then there are times where you just look at a situation from the beginning, and it looks like you're watching a car that's about to get in a wreck, and you are sitting there. If you're me, you're in a press box or in a studio somewhere watching it and thinking in my head, oh no, what are you doing? If you're a fan, you're probably yelling at the television, yelling at the feet. Like you can see things in the moment sometimes that just look like, oh no, how do you not see what I'm seeing? What is going on in your mind that led to this decision that you're making? And the decision was not letting Illinois score early. Tennessee had no less than 5 chances in those final moments, in those final few minutes, to just let Illinois score. And you're saying, why would you do that? Well, here's the thing. You're down by 1 point. The worst case scenario is your opponent scoring, getting a touchdown, going for 2, which they would go for 2, and then getting it, and then now you're down by 7 points. And the very best thing you can do is take the time you have left and go score, and then either make a decision to go for 1 or go for 2, play for overtime, or play for the win right there. But when you do that, you are putting the game in your control. You are putting your finger on the scales and you're saying, I will make the decisions and my players will go out there and make plays that will win or lose this game. And this mathematically gives us the best chance to do that. And not doing that, even as soon as Illinois got that first down where they're just outside the 10-yard line, 13, 14, 15, wherever it was, so they technically could go get a first down without scoring a touchdown. And at that point, they could, and they did, because they were smart, just sat on the ball, burned clock, gave their kicker a chip shot field goal to win it. And that, I mean, they say hindsight is, it's unfair to use hindsight to judge something. I'm not doing that here. If you don't believe me, go back to my social media account. Go back to the I guess a lot of it's on. If you're on Blue Sky, it's just Wes Rucker. If you're on Twitter, it's Wes Rucker TBA, or X, it's Wes Rucker TBA. You can go back and look in the moment. Go back and timestamp it. I think 5 or 6 separate times within like a 10-minute period, I said, "What in the world are you doing? Let them score. Let them score." It's almost like at the end of one of those 80s movies where you do the slow clap. Let them score. Let them score. Let them score. Because even at the college level, where college kickers are what they are, and by gosh, Tennessee knows that as well as anybody right now. Poor Max Gilbert. Tough year for him. That's another discussion for another day. Kid needs to have a really good offseason. There's got to be competition there. They got to get better there. Whether it's him or somebody else, they got to get better there. You got to be more consistent, more reliable there. And he had a great freshman year, but sophomore year had some tough moments in it, life of a kicker. But even in a situation where you're a college kicker, if you are attempting anything inside 30 yards, most of these guys could close their eyes and make that kick. They could close their eyes, take a swing at the ball, have a vague idea, a vague concept of where the uprights are, and kick the ball through there. And since it's that short, they can kick it so high that it's almost no chance to block it. Because the longer the kick, the lower the trajectory, the more chance it's going to get blocked. You don't see a lot of blocked PATs. You know why? Because it's almost impossible. It's also why the NFL moved back PATs to make things more interesting, because at that level, they just never missed them. They just never, ever missed them. And in college, the percentages. There are several college kickers who will start for 3 or 4 years in a college career and not miss one. Not one. So if you're down by 1 point and your choices are try to let the opponent score and give yourself a chance, and that's on one hand. And on the other hand, it's let the opponent run down clock, hope that you can force a fumble or something before then, or hope that they will miss a field goal that's almost never missed. I can't wrap my brain around the inability to see that outcome. Because for several minutes, it looked like exactly what would happen. And you're sitting there watching this going, listen, this is not an easy job for many reasons. It is a really, really difficult job. One that requires just everything you've got. Physically, mentally, psychologically, emotionally, spiritually in some cases. It requires everything you've got. And you got to make a lot of sacrifice to do it, and there's a lot of stress involved. I wouldn't want to do it, not in a million lifetimes. Even for the money. I don't think I'd want to do it. But you're paid that much when you're at a place like Tennessee, when you're at one of the 10 winningest programs in FBS history, program that's won multiple national championships, multiple conference championships, a program where if you do things correctly, it's not an easy job. There are easier jobs out there, but you can win anything that needs to be won as Tennessee's coach. You have that sort of backing. You have those resources. Any coach in that situation has got to be able to understand that basic thing in a game. Because this comes down to percentage calls, margin calls. And people talk about how much some people hate how sort of nerds have ruined sports in some ways because of all the figures and calculations, and they're taking scouting and stuff out of the hands of people who have done this forever and people who just sort of intrinsically understand what a player is and isn't. And I agree that you can't just look at cold, hard data. Sometimes you have to read a game, you have to read a situation, you have to make a call that maybe on a normal day would be less than a 50-50 call. It would not be on a normal day the best percentage call you could make. But you go with your gut and you make a call because you're reading a situation and you're seeing something different. That's fine. And that's why in these situations, I am loath to criticize a decision that is made when either A, I understand how many things go into it, or B, there are things that I don't know, or C, both. I'm not above criticizing or if you can't criticize and you can't take criticism, this ain't the job for you. Go do something else. God bless you. Go do something else. But I think it's really important, especially for people who have a significant enough pedestal that occasionally it can impact things. I think it's imperative that those people go above and beyond to be fair in their criticism. But for the life of me, I cannot understand how the end of that game was managed. I can't understand why you think a defense that has been on the field almost the entire night and wasn't very thin to go into the night, was missing a lot of its best players, was struggling like crazy to get stops all night long. Why you thought that your best chance to win was for that defense to make a play or for the opponent to miss a field goal that's rarely missed. I cannot wrap this tiny little brain around the thinking that goes into that. I can't. Guys, I've tried. And I guess fortunately or unfortunately, last night my son woke up at like 3:30 in the morning and was like, "Hey, I'm awake. I want to do stuff." I'm like, "No, you're going back to bed, buddy. Your dad worked for about 14 hours today." And it's 3:30 in the morning and I was just about to finally go to sleep for a few hours. "You, son, are going back to bed." And he was like, "No, I'm not." So I slept on the floor for a couple hours while trying to convince a toddler to go to sleep. So that time gives you a lot of time to keep thinking about stuff. And I kept trying to think, what am I missing? What component of this am I missing? I got nothing. And, I was here yesterday, obviously. Elijah and Emily were down there. And the time you're given in these press conferences is what it is. You can't ask every question that you want to ask. Sometimes you're only going to get one question, and then every reporter's going to get one. And it's a tough situation. It can be tough to get what you want from the time you have. But I can tell you, I wasn't there. But if I could have asked one question, it absolutely would have been that. And it wasn't answered because it wasn't asked. So the closest I could come up with was Josh Heupel, from other questions other people asked. The closest I could find was him sort of talking about the game in general and a couple of other things. So before I go back to talking about all of this, which I'm going to continue doing, we're going to take a quick break from this to go, you, the viewer, you, the listener, can hear what Josh Heupel had to say about that football game last night. And if we have it queued up, do we have it queued up? Then here's Josh Heupel.
Yeah, disappointing result. Didn't play clean enough in any phase of the game to get a win. And give credit to Illinois, but certainly a lot of things that we got to do better. Did like the way the guys, after a bad start in the second half, how they came back and responded to that and continued to compete. Just didn't get it done in the end. So offense, defense, special teams, coaches all together. So disappointed in that, but hard to say goodbye to some of these seniors. You look at some of those guys that suited up, chose to be here, play with their teammates. Got a ton of respect for all of them and who they are and what they've done inside of our program, and extremely proud of them. And challenged our guys that obviously everybody's disappointed, but this has got to be something that you take with you through the off season and help use as motivation and give us a chance to get better and get stronger. And we'll be back ready to roll in 26. I can promise you that. It's a series of one plays that make a difference, and there's a few of them that will be burned in my brain for a long time. And I think the disappointment of tonight, or the disappointment of any of the games during the course of the season, but in particular tonight, it's got a chance to be the fuel that you use as motivation starting tomorrow and when we get back in January. And it's a competitive game. You got to be on the right side of it, and you got to fight for it every single day. And that's why I talked to our guys about in the locker room tonight.
That's Josh Heupel talking about a lot of those things that needed to be discussed, I think, and were discussed a little bit. Not as many things as you'd like to see discussed. Obviously, I just mentioned the questions I would love to ask and what I'm going to talk about for the final 20 minutes or so of this episode. But just to make sure I don't start getting, I don't keep bloviating up here long enough to prevent us playing the clip that we have of Deshaun Bishop, who again, what a season he had. Former walk-on, stand up, Knoxville Carnes High School. You've produced a gem there. What a story he's been. The sophomore, he's just a guy you like being around and a guy you like seeing have success. So here's Deshaun Bishop talking about things that Tennessee needs to learn from this season as well.
And to Coach Heupel's point, what lesson do you take that will fuel you moving forward?
I just feel like it's just kind of just a repeat, of us just beating ourselves, not taking any away from Illinois, but man, you look at a lot of these games that we've played, man, we're really just a couple plays away from being honestly undefeated, like I mentioned earlier in the season. And, there's glory in this. I believe that. And, just this feel for next year, I'm very excited to get after it after how many days we're off, and get back into the flow of football again. But there's a lot you can learn from this, and we're not going to take this loss lightly. I know it's not going to carry over to next year, obviously, but it'll definitely be a reminder of just you don't want this outcome again, because I keep saying to myself, man, we're experiencing a lot of these outcomes, and there's got to be something different next year.
Indeed. There do need to be things that are different. And again, there are things about that game last night. There were good stories that emerged out of it. Guys making plays, guys playing when they didn't have to, guys playing through, fairly significant injuries to play in a bowl game that the result didn't really matter. And I even said going into the game, I can see a situation where losing that game is better for Tennessee in the big picture because it removes all doubt of what needs to change. And there shouldn't have been any doubt anyway. But, maybe that's a little bit of a false dawn if they win that game that doesn't mean much and they're not really spending every bit of their time and energy thinking about the things that absolutely have to get better. But I can't understand the way that game was managed down the stretch. I cannot, and it wasn't the first time. Again, there were times this season where there were difficult decisions that needed to be made. They didn't work. And you could that obviously, anytime that happens, that leaves you open to criticism. But a lot of those at the beginning, a few of them, I said, I can understand why this decision was made. But then a couple times down the stretch in games, there were decisions made that I just can't I just couldn't see the thought process that went into that. And when Josh Heupel talks about things in the offseason, things that are going to be burned into his brain, I hope for his sake, I hope for Tennessee's sake, that the way time, situation, and clock are managed, I hope that's on the list. Because I got to be honest about this. If that does not improve, it radically lowers the ceiling of what is possible for this program with this staff. Because you can build if you want, and if you're given the opportunity, if you're good enough at evaluating, good enough at developing, if you got the NFL backers behind you, you can put together the best roster in the country. And you can put together a roster that is almost hard to break. But that is really, really, really hard to do. I would argue prohibitively expensive to do. And it's by its very nature not sustainable. But even if you do that, there are going to be, even the best roster in the country, with the parity in this day and age and the chaotic nature of sports and the especially chaotic nature of 18 to 22-year-old men in any way doing anything in life at any time for any reason. They're a little erratic by nature. Guilty as charged. Been there. You can build the best roster in the country. You are still going to have a couple of games in the season, at minimum, where you will have to make a critical decision at a critical time in a game, and if you get it wrong, you lose the game, or probably lose the game. There is no way around that. The most important thing a college coach can do is put together the best roster that he or she can put together. That is number one. Through recruiting, through developing, your job, aside from, having good citizens, which we'd all like to think is an important thing. I think it is. Not everyone does. I'm not going to judge. Nobody's perfect, but you don't want your team to be, the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas squad. You'd like to have some good dudes in there. So let's just say that's obviously there. But aside from that, rule number one, put together the best roster that you can put together, develop it. Heck, in this day and age, purchase it, whatever. By any means necessary, that's number one. Number two, you have got to get decisions right when they matter most in games. You've got to understand the timeouts that you have, the timeouts your opponent has, the weather, the clock, the flow of a game, and you combine that with gut, and you have to put all of those things together, including who's healthy for you and who's not, who's healthy or not healthy for the other team. There are so many factors, and you have very little time to make those decisions. And no one who has ever coached or will ever coach will ever get all of those decisions right. You're going to get some wrong. You would like to think that you get more right than wrong. And you know what? With few exceptions, the ones that you get wrong will get more attention than the ones you get right, because that, unfortunately, is the way life is right now. I'm not going to do it on this program, but this is one program. There's a whole other world out there. Whole lot of other media, whole lot of people on social media, whole lot of things that just are the way they are. And you feel like Don Quixote trying to change it. It's just not going to happen. But you have to think about the world you want, but also the world that is, and kind of understand both of those things and try to make the most you can out of it. But you're not going to get all of those right. And sometimes it can be like going to Vegas. I'm not a big gambler, but a lot of people are. And sometimes you just get hot. And sometimes you just get cold. And these things can come in stretches. They can come in bunches. Right? Like as Eric Cartman would say, they tend to gather in clusters. Like that's how it goes. And so I understand, or try to understand, a lot of these decisions that are made. But some of these decisions that have made this season, I just cannot understand how, given the resources available, that these decisions were made. And the result of that game last night, it did not matter. But when you see something pop up that has been a theme in a season, in many ways, and now, whether it's fair or not, has completely overshadowed the many good things and many good stories that emerged from this season, that absolutely was not a disaster. It wasn't a good season. Wasn't as good as you could have been. Wasn't as good as you should have been. But again, I've seen hopeless. I've seen terrible. This was neither of those things. But in the offseason, you're going to go through a period where you're going to see who's leaving your roster, who's coming back, who can you get from the portal. You got to assemble it. You got to put together. That takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of resources. But somewhere in there, Josh Heupel and his staff have got to get together. I don't know if this is like a weekend retreat, a seminar, bring in someone from the Ivy League to sit down and explain some of these things to you. You've got to get a better understanding of these situations, and you have to get these calls right. Because just to be very, very clear about this, there are a lot of us who do not make $9 or $10 million a year, who could have and did see that going exactly the way it went because of decisions that were made. If we can understand that, if we, the normies, we, the citizens, we, the unwashed masses, if we can understand this, then the people running the Tennessee football program dang sure better understand it as well. And if you do not get this corrected, then there absolutely is a ceiling on what is possible right now. That, I'm not going to tell you that's a fact, but I can tell you it's what I think, and I think it's as close as something can be to being a fact. That if that trend does not get reversed, then all of the good and occasionally legitimately great things this staff has done for this program, bailing it out, bringing it from the ashes of hell, all right? What they did, putting respectability back on the name of this program, forever, tip your cap for that, forever. But standards are back now. And congratulations, you did a good job bringing those standards back. But now they're back. And now what a lot of us can see is that some of these decisions made in games are difficult to defend. And some of them feel more or less impossible to defend. And when it's something that seems so simple, right? Easy to say from this place. Easy to say that. It's easy to say that. Much harder to go out there and do it. But you have got to understand the clock. You've got to understand the flow of the game. You have to understand what gives you the best chance possible to win a game. And not just, if you try to let Illinois score and then Illinois does this thing like where you've seen smart teams do this, where they'll get past the first down marker and then they'll slide. Hey, tip your cap. That's two well-coached football teams. That's two well-coached football teams. Because you did what gives you the best chance to win, and then they responded by doing the best thing for them to win. And they were in a stronger position to begin with, so they won the game. You can live with those results. You don't like them, but you can live with them. But I just, there are a lot of things that go into putting together a roster that is good enough to really compete at like the highest levels of this game. And Tennessee's darn near done that. Now, just getting into that playoff field is different from actually being one of the 2 or 3 teams that really could win it. Tennessee was nowhere near that last year, and I don't think it obviously wasn't near that this season. But if a couple of things had gone differently, that team is in the playoff. And I'm not talking, that's not a platitude. That's not BS. I think it's nearly a fact. The Georgia game begging to be won. 5 or 6 opportunities to make one play and win that game. Don't do it. Oklahoma, take a start that should have just buried Oklahoma, and somehow you've turned it into a game where it shouldn't have been, and then you lose. You don't manage some things well in that game. You lose that game. You win both those games. Let's throw Alabama to the side. You just do what you're supposed to do in those 2 other games. You're going to be in the playoff. I just don't see a world where that doesn't happen. It's very hard to see one where that doesn't happen. Other people may disagree. I don't agree with those people. And I think when you look at the situations Tennessee was dealt in the offseason, some of its own making, some not of its own making, just to be in a position where that could have happened, that is legitimately impressive. But then to undo all of it by making a couple of decisions that in real time we're going, what are you doing? It's a concern. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that's not a concern. It is a concern, and it's got to change. The management of these situations, if it is not changed, then you are tying one hand behind your back before going into one of the hardest fights imaginable. And there's only one outcome from that. The best outcome when you go into it with one arm tied behind your back is you lose with honor. like that's you're not winning. You're losing, and it's a matter of, are you doing it with honor or not? Are you going down swinging? But you go in there with one hand tied behind your back, you're losing. You're not winning a championship. You're just not. And I don't know what goes into getting that changed, but in all the talk this offseason of, and it's legitimate, reshaping this roster, trying to get better. There's some really good young talent on this team. Are you going to keep it together? And what are you going to fortify it with? How many of these youngsters are going to be ready to go next year because they need to be? What are you doing at quarterback? Obviously a big talking point. All these things, those are normal things, though. Those are normal discussions going from like good to great. It's even harder than going from bad to good. Going from good to great's really, really hard. And it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of commitment, all these things. But on top of that, I think we have to sit here and say, how much does any of that matter if you're not going to make high percentage calls or calls that give you the highest percentage on paper to win the game? You just have to manage this better. And to be not impolite, but just to be perhaps a bit curt, but I think honest, it's not good enough. It's not value for money. It's not value for resource, not value for energy. It's got to be better. This staff, led by this head coach, has done so much more good than bad at Tennessee. But it's got a lot of thinking to do this offseason. And it's a shame because there's a lot of things I wouldn't have said unless that game ended exactly the way it ended. Because I don't think the result of that game matters. But some of the decisions made in it took a complicated situation and made it even more complicated. Now you got an uncomfortable offseason. You were going to have one anyway. Now it's more uncomfortable. And I think the first place that you got to look, starting at the top down, is in the mirror. Is this good enough? It wasn't. So it's got to get better. We got a lot more to talk about it this week, guys. Happy New Year, certainly. Be safe tonight. Be safe. Make good decisions. Make high percentage decisions. Have a good time, though. And we will see you with groggy eyes here in about 23 hours.